Should you use analog or digital notes when reading a book? That's the question we're going to answer on this edition of Dr. Todd Explains. Hello everyone, this is Dr. Todd, and I've been working through the overall philosophy of note-taking when it comes to reading books. Trust me when I tell you, I have tried everything under the sun, both analog and digital over the years, in order to capture information. I've tried applications of every kind: Obsidian, Evernote, DevonThink, OneNote, you name it, Standard Notes, Apple Notes, I've tried it. I've tried bullet journaling. I've tried the index card method of the analog Zettelkasten. I've tried it all. And in this talk, what I want to do is give you a little bit of perspective, some of it based on neuroscience, as to how you can approach the task of reading a book and taking notes. And instead of my answer being it needs to be either analog or digital, I would say it needs to be a combination of both. Now, the first thing you need to do though is you got to understand the purpose of reading the book you chose to pick up. Like, why did you pick it up? What are you hoping to get out of the book? Because it depends on if it's a pleasure read, maybe you don't really take notes on it at all. If you're being tested in a certain way, maybe you need to take notes a specific way. If you're just doing research on a project, maybe you need to take notes a certain way. But if you truly want to understand what you're reading, internalize some of the main concepts, I think this would work best. Now, this works on any platform with any kind of paper, pen, application, doesn't matter. Regular textbooks, regular books, paper books, if you will, or Kindle books, e-readers, doesn't matter. But the idea is, once you've decided what you want to do, as far as like what the purpose of reading this is, what the end result needs to be, then here's kind of the process I would recommend you do. Let's say you're doing this in order to increase your knowledge in a certain field. Let's say for me, counseling or psychology. I want to learn more to where it becomes part of me. And remember, I've mentioned in previous videos, memorization is not learning. Playing with ideas until they become part of who you are is what learning's all about. So one of the things I've struggled with is I love analog note-taking, but then what happens if you lose your notebook and all this kind of stuff? I love the convenience of digital note-taking, but can you go as deep as you need to? So let me tell you the way I kind of approach things. I decide why I'm reading the book. So there's a selection process there. Once I determine that, I start reading the book. If it's a regular hardback or a textbook, a paper book, I'll highlight certain things, make notes in the margins, those kind of things. And that's sort of an analog way of doing things. But I want you to think about there's distinct roles. And of course, if I'm doing it in a Kindle book, I'm doing highlights. There's distinct roles for both analog and for digital. And here's the combination you really need to think about. Analog is for synthesizing and reflection. You're really tracing the author's argument. You are writing your own thoughts about it. You are drawing graphs, charts, whatever you need to do to help you understand on a deeper level. And you're doing that by hand. And when I say by hand, I'm not talking about on an iPad, I'm talking about on paper, which means it can be any kind of notebook, it can be the back of an envelope, it could be a napkin, doesn't matter, because you're not finished with it. But the analog piece, as you read through, you're also making margin notes if you're reading a hardback book, a regular book, a paper book. You're using that time to engage the text, engage the author. You're tracing out his argument or her argument. You're developing your own thought processes. And so let's say there's a long quote in there. You won't rewrite that quote. You'll summarize it, but if it's a quote that you really want to use later, you may write on your notebook, in your notes or your paper notes, you might write key quote on page 36, something like that. So you go through that process in kind of a step one process, and you're really synthesizing and you're reflecting on that, and you're putting those thoughts down on paper. This is where the digital part comes in. Whereas the analog part is for synthesizing and reflection. The digital part is for summarizing and retention. So if you have only the best stuff on the analog notebook paper, really gets into your digital notes. And it can even be further refined once you get it there. But the idea is you're taking, if there's 50 entries, let's say you have on the analog, you may have 5 over on the digital, but those 5 are good. They're ones you want to be able to search on, you want to retain. They're turns of phrase maybe that you used that you can that can draw into your attention, help you remember things. There could be specific quotes. Remember, you go back to your analog and it says quote on page 46, so you can go back to page 46, you write it down if you want to say things a certain way. But the idea is it doesn't need to be either or, it needs to be both and. Then when you've got them in a digital format, you can study those and go back over those. And if you think about it, even if you're having a conversation with a friend over lunch about what a book's about, it's really your summaries and things like that from those digital notes that have come from the hard work you did on the analog side that you're going to be sharing. Also, you'll have enough information there if you're writing an article or a research paper or a book. You'll have what you need, but it'll also be tracked back to page numbers. So, and that's another thing I should have said before. Anytime you put anything either on analog or on digital, always include the page number or the location number if you're using an ebook, something like that where you can find it easily. But so just remember this, it's not either or. You need to have both and if you truly want to drive deeper down. The analog is for synthesizing and reflection. You're tracing the author's argument, you're putting your own notes, you're playing the what if games of this sounds like such and such, you're making your own connections there just on a piece of paper. But from there, you take the best of the best, stuff that you're going to need to find in the future, stuff that really spoke to you, important quotes, key essential ideas that can help you flesh out at a moment's notice or explain the author's main ideas, those kind of concepts. And even how you want to apply those ideas, even your own experiences of, oh, this is just like when this happens. All that stuff will then be transferred over. So you may have 50, 100 entries here and you may have 10 here. But whatever goes in here will be gold. And the beauty of that is that if you take care of it, you never lose it, but it provides you a more succinct, concise summary of what you need. So remember, synthesizing and reflection, summarizing and retention is the digital side. And you may be thinking, well, what about all my paper notes? I don't want to lose those. That's fine. Scan them in and attach them to whatever document or put them in a special place that you cross-reference over to your digital notes and you'll be fine. At the end of the day, you're really coming to terms with the author. You're wrestling with him or her on the idea level. And those ideas are going to be played with in such a way that you can make them your own. And what comes out of that is fruit. It goes from kind of like an analog to a digital to then your own creation based on this process after you read. So I hope that was helpful. Now, I don't know how you go about studying for reading a book, like how you keep notes. If you have any unique ideas, put them down in the comments section. Also, if you have any questions about any specifics about what I've said, please leave that down. I'd love to interact with you there. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and then that like bell so you don't miss further videos. God bless. I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you on the next video.